Yeah, whatever. They're tree strap-ons. And he just put them on, like they're out of the tree. Thanks for coming.
So anyway, you were lying about what?
Is one of those
Okay. Well, I'll keep it there just in case. Yeah.
This is the reclines. I'll give you an imaginary hand. Maybe it's in at one end. Make it so I can do that.
there's just been recent legislation that took away the ability for parks and rec to serve as a pleasure.
I would say less. It's more like 30. There's quite a bit of features.
No.
Let's go ahead and start here in about a minute. Go ahead and take your seats. If you don't mind, start migrating towards the front and make it easy on ourselves here. Hi.
Not probably my first choice. I figure you gotta get a putt that close to whack a mountain lion with this color.
Tough guy. Honey, you can't get a skill.
All right. Thank you for coming. Thank you for moving up. I noticed that everybody complies with requests except for the Game and Fish folks who are still in the back. That's all right. We'll forgive you this time. But I did want to welcome you and thank you for coming to this constituency group. We have some important work ahead of us tonight, and hopefully we can move through that. But before we begin, I'd like to follow suit of what we did last time. I'd like to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, if that's all right, if you'd all join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And on that same note, I'd like to start out with a quick moment of silence for those people that have sacrificed in whatever way, by taking a moment of silence and acknowledging those people that allow us to meet in this type of format. Thank you. Okay, so first off, I'd like to acknowledge Kurt Davis, who is the chair of this constituency group. I also see a couple other commissioners. Commissioner Husted, I saw. Give him a round of applause. Commissioner Freeman, I saw him as well. Where is he? There he is. All right. Is that all current commissioners? We have some.
Jack. You already introduced me.
Oh. He's playing on his BlackBerry. That's all right. We'll give him. Past Commissioner Hermbrode, thank you for coming. Are there any other past commissioners that are present that I missed or didn't see? All right. Just a quick reminder, restrooms are out here in the lobby as well as water. Take a minute now to turn off your cell phones. If you're under 30 and you're going to explode if you turn them off, go ahead and put them on vibrate for me if you will. It helps us continue this on a little bit better. But I want to take a minute. You'll notice that I'm a different moderator than the one you had last time. My name is Lauren Chase. I do work for Game and Fish. I'm a fourth generation Arizonan. I grew up hunting and fishing up and down the Rocky Mountains. And when it came time for me to go to school, I decided that I wanted to become a wildlife biologist, which I did. I went to Brigham Young University to complete that bachelor's degree. And I decided that that wasn't enough, and so I decided to continue research, heading down to Bolivia and doing some research down there in Peru. After that, I decided that I really wanted to study humans and wildlife at the same time, so I continued on with a master's degree, looking at bighorn sheep and the interaction they have with humans, as well as some more of the biology side. And after that, I decided that I still wasn't quite ready to become a real person and get a real job, so I stayed in the nice, cozy comfort womb of academia and decided to go to CSU to get a PhD, studying the human dimensions, which is the interaction of humans and their environment and wildlife. So that's kind of where I'm from. The reason why I'm here today is because I have a bit of a daydream. I have a daydream of sitting by the campfire with drinking my hot chocolate, watching my kids teach their kids how to skin a deer and do so with fewer nicks than I put in the hide, and hopefully we'll be able to progress generation by generation because frankly I destroyed my first hide. But that's kind of the daydream, and what I do today affects that daydream that I have. And this meeting that we have is one small step that gets me to that dream all the way out there. Just some quick foundational rules that we need to go over. Really, I only have one rule. Did we just lose power? Okay. We really only have one rule where I request that folks respect each other, everything that goes along with that. If we can speak one at a time, that's important just so we can hear what everybody has to say, and what other people have to say might give you a good idea to go ahead and share as well. Once you get up to the microphones, it's important that you use those mics, and it's important that you get right down in there. That one, so everybody here can hear. We're also webcasting this, and they're not going to hear you if you don't get right down on those mics. I'm also a little less formal than the prior moderator. He was using a set time system. I'm not going to do that. If you're continuing on and you're making good points and you continue to make valid points after 3 minutes are up, I'm not going to cut you off. But if it's after 1 minute you still haven't made a good point, I reserve the right to cut you off. What that looks like is I just start inching closer and closer to you, and that way you'll know that it might be time to start wrapping it up. If you and I are cuddling and you're still talking, there's a problem, so that kind of gives you an idea of the time frame there. I also reserve the right to call on you. If you're sitting there and it looks like you have a good idea, I'm going to ask you to come up. I know that makes some people uncomfortable, but sometimes it's the silent people who make the best points. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt and let him talk a little bit about what we accomplished in the last meeting as well as some of the comments.
Again, thank you for coming, and I know most of you are returnees, so that's much appreciated as well. I think all of us knew that the last meeting, our objective in that meeting was to try to not just focus on one issue and try to expand into multiple issues, because the Commission's instruction in the creation of this group was really to try to form a group that would begin to look at a broad array of issues related to Sportsman and provide an avenue to have discussions and then begin to prioritize issues. And so we're going to get later on in the agenda, we're going to be kind of moving into what I would call the second stage organizationally. How do we do that? How do we do it? Because we can't do everything in a large group. So we're going to get into that discussion a little bit later and tap into your ideas about how to successfully organize so that this enterprise continues to provide value both to the department, to you, to the Commission, and to both affiliated, non-affiliated sportsmen out there. And so our objective here is to get through this agenda in an orderly process, and there's some decision points, recommendations, tapping into your recommendations so that we can really get the ball moving with an objective. If you remember, we talked a little bit in the first meeting about wanting to actually have some measurable, tangible outcomes, not just be a forum group, but really where we can have some measurable outcomes. And part of what we're going to lay the foundation for tonight is creating an enterprise that can get us there. And look back in a year from now, if you remember, we talked about a year from now, can we look back and say that we made progress on X, we made progress on Y, maybe we didn't make progress on C, whatever it is, but there was progress made. There was an increase in the dialogue. There was prioritization of issues. The Commission can rely on that. The department can rely on that. Our affiliated, non-affiliated sportsmen can rely on that. So that's really the objective, and you'll see, I think, as we roll through the agenda, that there is a method to the madness that we can start really pushing this rock uphill a little bit. So again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule, driving, I'm sure in many cases, great distances, and giving your time again, your valuable time. It really is appreciated. Go ahead. We want to talk a little bit about some of the themes that came out of last meeting. And so we have a promised 3-minute slide for you.
Gary, can you turn it on?
You should be on.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. All right. My name is Craig McMullen. I work as the Wildlife Recreation Chief for the Game and Fish Department. And many of you are aware, many of you probably participated in the offer to submit comments to the department related to the, that works better. Good job. All right. Related to the development, both leading up to and 2 weeks after the first Sportsman's Constituent Group meeting. And one of the things we hope to accomplish by receiving those comments was sort of take a barometer from you all, the drivers of this effort, for kind of what the issues are that are affecting you all and that are foremost on your minds. And so you all have received emails with links to where these a compilation of the comments are on our website. And we also provided hard copies for everybody who's here tonight. There's 30 pages worth. I will let you know that we went ahead and compiled these comments as they were written. If there were typos there when they were submitted to us, they still exist. There are a few redactions. if there were pointed comments towards an individual or a specific organization. So what we did is we looked through those comments and we sought themes. And of course we can't account in 4 slides and 3 minutes worth of discussion for every sort of comment that was submitted to us. But when we tried to categorize generally the themes, sort of the barometric pressure of what's foremost on your minds, this is really the four bullet points that were common threads amongst most of the comments, and you can read through them yourselves. Obviously, we didn't catch all of them, but the first one was a need to have inclusive development and vetting of any sorts of legislation that affects sportsmen in general. The next one was the need for a transparent process, and in that transparent process, ensuring that both, sportsmen's groups, representatives of sportsmen's groups, and sportsmen who are unaffiliated with sportsmen groups have a voice. There was a large thread of comments that dealt what we chose to characterize as department issues. And those had to do with tag allocations, the draw, bonus point, revenue issues like the habitat stamp was an idea that was floated out this year. So you can see up there, it's just a whole bunch of issues that had to deal with the form and the function and the way the department does business. So that's how we characterize that suite of comments. And then the last one was the idea of communication. And really, many of the comments spoke to, not specifically, but in essence, the need for sportsmen's groups and unaffiliated sportsmen to do a better job of communicating between and amongst themselves. And then, commensurate with that, the need for the department to do a better job of communicating with sportsmen. So that's kind of the general themes of the comments we got in the previous comment period, and we hope that that can serve as sort of a context and a launching point for the proceedings the rest of the day. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I want to draw your attention to the agenda real quick. Right now we're kind of through the housekeeping, and in the next hour or so, I'd like to discuss where we go from here. And then we'll take a break and talk a little bit about a potential steering committee or a subcommittee after that break, and then we'll wrap it up and talk about priorities of issues that or hot topics that we need to discuss. And so, we've taken about 20 minutes or so here, and our purpose isn't to speak with you. Our purpose here is more to listen to you. So at the very top of this, we have the purpose or goal is to discuss how constituents can best unite and work together on issues and challenges affecting the future of hunting, fishing, and wildlife management in Arizona. That's the purpose of these 2 meetings that we've had thus far. But I would be very curious to hear from you guys. What purpose do you see for this group going forward? Go ahead and hop up to the mic and let us know what you see this group needing, the purpose of this group. Just so you know, I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old at home, and I can outweigh them. I can outweigh you. So, yeah, sir, go ahead and hop up to the microphone here.
Hi, my name is Jack Wheath. This is my first attendance. I wasn't at the earlier meeting. And what I can see what we're doing here, and hopefully we can accomplish and get in unison to give all of our ideas so that the Game and Fish are able to present everything that we need and what we want to do to the political machine, so that they have all of our backing when they do go before the legislature, if they need to get something changed or a bill passed or what have you, that this group is in unison in supporting them in that endeavor. So that's what I was thinking this was about, and that's why I'm here. So.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Paul Cormany, and I'm representing myself. I was at the last meeting, and I think you guys summarized exactly what we were all about perfectly with those 4 bullet points. And I think what we ought to be doing tonight is figure out what it is that we want to do as a group to try and promote those things. And I figured since no one else was going to get up, I better get up here and get this ball rolling. So I don't have any specific items on there. You know, my big hot button in the last meeting was the habitat stamp issue. I see that on those 4 bullet points, you just had one word on there for communication, and that really summed it up very well. But it was a big issue in that many of the people in the meeting felt like there were a lot of tools out there that we weren't utilizing or adequately utilizing, and that we need to, I think, make that one of our agenda items, is figure out how we're going to be able to use all of the technology that's available today to get the word out so that we can be connected as a community, the groups and the non-affiliated sportsmen and the department and the commission, so that we can all work toward our common goals. The other thing that I saw up there that was real important was being involved with the legislative process, and I think that was a huge hole that's existed in the past, and I don't know exactly how we're going to accomplish that, but somehow we need to be able to have people involved at the legislature so that we can be aware of what's going on out there, because not everything that's going to affect wildlife and sportsmen in the state of Arizona is going to come through this area. I mean, there's going to be people coming from left field that are going to put things into the legislative process that could have a severe impact on our lifestyle and our wildlife, and we just need to figure out a way that we can be aware of it so that we can communicate once we have that great communication system in place, what's going on, and so that we can get the consensus of the sportsmen and get moving all in one direction. So I was really kind of surprised to see that up there as being number 1. I thought that was something that might not really make it too big in this group, but I think it's very important that we have an opportunity to have a voice as a group, and also perhaps maybe do some other things to help promote legislation. Along with that, I also think that we have a lot of resources available to us to do things on the ground through the department and through the wildlife groups. There's you know, the HPC system, I think, works real well for getting specific projects on the board and getting them funded and that sort of thing. So I don't think this group really needs to address those types of things. I don't think we need to have another organization that's going to be trying to put projects together and that sort of thing. I think that whole thing exists in a great form already. If there's anything that's needed from this group relative to wildlife projects and that sort of thing, again, would be more towards the fundraising part of it, because when I looked at what the HPC had on their agenda for this past year for projects, there was, I don't know, 40 or 50 projects out there, and it only looked like maybe a third of those got funded. So that tells me that people felt like those projects were important enough to get them all the way up to the HPC from the local HPCs, but there must not have been enough money to go around for all of those things. So that's another thing that I think we ought to take a look at is fundraising, however that comes about, whatever form that might be. And again, my personal opinion is I think the habitat stamp is a great way to get money to the people that are doing the work on the ground. And I had one other comment, but it eludes me at this point, but I think that gives us a pretty good start. There were one other thing relative to fundraising, I guess, and that is we talked about it in the last meeting more or less in the context of conducting projects. But I think that there are other things that we need to address as opposed to the more traditional wildlife type projects, things like recruitment and retention, and perhaps we might even want to delve into the realm of maybe like a political action committee, because if we see that there are organizations out there that are pressing their agenda that are not necessarily aligned with the types of things that we'd like to see in our agenda, then we need to have the resources to be able to go out there and lobby for our position as well. And I know that that's a real problem with the commission and with the department when the legislature is considering a bill or a law or something like that. You guys can't actively go out there and lobby for or against it. So maybe we're enough removed from that formal structure that the constituent group could take on those types of projects and represent all of the sportsmen in the state. And by the way, one last point.
Okay.
I think the name is great. I don't think you need to change anything. Sportsman's I can't even say it now. Constituent group is a great name.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It follows up on a little bit of what you're talking about. Because if you look at points, I'm remembering the slide here, points 1, point 4, point 3. So let's talk about point 1, the talk about the legislative stuff. Sitting back after, replaying the meeting in my head and going through the comments, and some of you have emailed me in the interim, and some of you have called me as well in the interim. On the legislative front, and this is a two-way street, so I want to be real clear about this. On the legislative front, one of the things I've noticed, and part of it is because I do this for a living, so it's a little easier for me to understand this piece. One of the things we've not done well as a collective is shared our legislative agendas in advance. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Different groups have had very good legislative agendas, things that they wanted to push from their particular organization. There are individuals that want to push things from their own personal perspective. The department has a legislative agenda each session. And one of the things I was thinking in my mind as a follow-up to the meeting is one of the things this group could help coordinate and put on is legislation is primarily, most of you know, is written in November, December for introduction in January. Most of the groundwork is done in November and December. You have an election, new members will be coming on. They'll get pounded with everybody's ideas. People will be shopping for bill sponsors, all that part of that legislative process. What we lack, in my opinion, in a group like this, I think could really provide help in this area, is a legislative summit. I guess, and there's other better terms than that, where groups and entities, the department, can bring a legislative agenda to a summit where we all talk about what are our objectives. And sometimes that will end up meaning bills get married together, which makes it easier versus, 500 different bills running at the legislature. An idea that may look good to one group may cause a problem for another group, but if you make certain changes, it's, would be okay. So it's a chance, in essence, to show and tell, to have conversations so that there are fewer surprises come January. And if you, from my perspective in my business, we do that as kind of an order of things when we're dealing, if I've got clients that I got to work on legislation, I'm going to go talk to other people about it in advance because I don't need them banging on my head in January, February. I'd rather them bang on my head on November and in December and see if there's a way to. And sometimes you can't work through everything, but at least you know where everybody's coming from and what their perspectives are. And so I think a group like this could play a key role in creating that tradition in Arizona, where we bring those disparate groups and interests together and we try to have a discussion about what people want to accomplish. So that's something and that goes to the communication line. It goes to that line of everyone saying all these different issues they were interested, because some of those issues could be legislative issues. Some of those are policy issues that the department, and then we'll talk about later about how do you prioritize and figuring out the best system. But when I look at this legislative piece, it nicks on 3 of those 4. And communication comes up when people don't feel like they know, or they feel like they've heard about it after the fact, that's whenever you see people respond appropriately so that there was a breakdown in communication. So this would be one more vehicle that would increase that. It would give people an opportunity to bounce what they're trying to achieve and do, and hopefully everyone walks out of there, quite frankly, with some forms of agreement on at least key pieces of legislation, and instead of having the fight at the legislature, and that creates its own problems among groups, how do you instead avoid that? So that's just something I throw out as one of the things I saw from the last meeting and comments that you all made, and so it's just a suggestion. Yeah, if anyone has a comment on that, feel free to, including it's a bad idea, so shut up. That's okay too.
Thank you. My name is Bob Hernbrod. Many of you know that my career was within wildlife agencies, and I've been through this once before, and I have a concern as to us putting another layer between the decisions and the recommendations. A little bit of history. I put together a group like this when I actually worked in something like what Lauren does, and the commission chose not to follow those recommendations, and put it bluntly, things went to hell. And I think it. I mean, Kurt, I think this can really work, and I'm excited to see it work. But I think there is a big danger that we don't make too many expectations from a group, from this side, and what we say to you and what we carry politically, and I think we need to always keep that in mind when we start putting this together. You know, because if I don't like the number of tags on the kaibab and you make a different recommendation, now we're enemies again. And I don't want to get into that.
Agree. I think there is, but at the same time, I guess, and I'm not at all arguing your point, because it's a level of expectations.
Yes.
If I had a bill that I wanted introduced that said all tags go to muzzleloader, and I'm going to run down to the legislature and I want to introduce that bill, my guess is we wouldn't come to an agreement in this room that that's a good idea.
But but there are things that we as a group may come together that may not be good science to that agency and their recommendations to you as a commissioner.
Correct. And I would rather hear that in November or December. From my perspective, I would rather have the department say, well, here's where we could see a problem.
But we need to understand on the other side that you may not take our recommendations.
Right.
And that does not mean that you don't respect what we tried to do.
Right.
But that it's your responsibility, not ours.
Right. There's a lot of times, I mean, I know you have all of you that have been active in your groups and you've gotten involved in legislation. There are times when 2 parties or 4 parties can't come to an agreement. But the opportunity to talk about what they don't like, what they do like, or if you modified this, in my opinion, and it doesn't always work great. Sometimes, people just can't agree, and that's okay. That's okay. But an attempt to do that, usually, I would argue it's the 90-10 rule. 90% of the time you could come to some level of agreement. 10% of the time you may not be able to, and people just have to part at that point and say, my objectives are different than yours, and we'll see what happens.
I'm not concerned about us not agreeing here and giving you different things, but what I'm concerned about is what this group expects from what they do, And that, to me, that's where what I've done historically
Yeah.
went to hell.
And it can.
You
There's no doubt.
understand, I think
Absolutely.
you understand where I'm coming from, right? And I want us to do this, but I also am concerned about where that leads and what we expect as a group
Sure.
and what we say to you.
It's fair. That's absolutely fair. And again, I'm not married to any ideas. It's just something that laying there thinking about it for a few days, what could be improved, where, and it may be a horrible idea. Or there may be a modification on that idea that's better, but.
Okay. So I'm hearing maybe manage expectations of the group.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. As this gentleman and this gentleman are coming up, as you're approaching, be thinking in a decade or two, after you say I've been involved with that group, what would you like to have accomplished after a decade or two? But I'll let you go, and then I'll let you have your comment.
Well, I was at the last meeting. My name is Bruce Johnson. I was at the last meeting, and I've been involved in this process and worked with the department and the commission on issues over the years. I guess I'm still a little confused as to what this organization is to be. The title, at least for now, is Sportsman's Constituent Group, but it appears to me so far that it's being ramrodded by the commission and the department, and I wonder if that's to be the case in the future, or is it really truly to be a constituent group? We have a chair that's a current commissioner. We have a moderator that's a employee of the department. We're meeting in the department conference room, and I guess I think that that's one of the first things we need to address is that the organization that is to go forward or not? Because if it is, that places certain constraints on what can and can't be done in terms of open meetings laws, records, and so on. And it may place some constraints on people's ability to be frank about what their opinions are. So that's my first question, and I guess based on the answer to that, I may have a lot more, but thank you.
The answer to that is I'm not going to answer it. The reason why is it's up to you to answer it. This is your group. How would you like it to look?
And let's put it in the context of what the commission's intent was.
Yeah.
I signed on for a year. Okay, so a year is what I signed. I think, honestly, the commission's intent was to help get the ball rolling, and then you would figure out what you want it to be. And that may mean something much different than how we're currently organizing. It doesn't mean it, absolutely. I think to go to that, I think that's a great question, and it's a great point. And the answer is what do you want it to be? And I think that was the commission's, my understanding, when they leaned over and said, would you do this? That was the intent, was that you would end up determining that, and it may go a different direction over time that doesn't have some of the constraints you appropriately point out. So my answer to you is I would see it move, as it matures, move on, and it doesn't need to necessarily have a commissioner involved in it, if that's a direct and honest answer. Unless invited.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Ron Fennessy. This is my first meeting. I was out of town for the last one. I wanted to just address one point under communication. We were talking about publishing and sharing the plans and legislative updates, et cetera. I think another key part of it, addressing the former commissioner's comment, was if you're going to develop a bunch of impassioned and energetic people to develop the recommendations, a key part of that communication back, particularly if the decisions are not to follow some of those recommendations, are why what are the rationale, and getting some understanding. Everyone may not agree with it, but at least we understood that the idea didn't sail into a black hole. It was considered, and here's the rationale why a different direction is going.
Thank you. Would anybody like to address those last two comments? Go ahead. I saw some body language or some facial expressions that people agree, people disagree. We'd like to hear from you. Go ahead.
My name is Tom Mackin, and I was here on the first meeting and representing myself this evening. The idea of Sportsman coming together to construct solutions for problems that come up from time to time is inherent, almost destined to fail. The very fact that we're independent, that we choose to hunt with different weapons, different techniques, different tools, different levels of involvement, is very, very rampant throughout our ranks, and that's a good thing. If everybody would switch to archery, you can never get drawn for an archery tag. So I'm glad to see that a lot of people don't want to do archery. That being said, and I've been involved with sportsmen's groups for 30 years now here in Arizona. What I see is, even though many people have asked for representation and for a group to be formed to voice their opinions or to provide an outlet for their opinions, there are actually a very, very few, minuscule number of people that are willing to take on those responsibilities. People sitting in this room tonight, many of them are currently involved, many have been involved, and when you look at the board of directors for these groups, you will see that people go from group to group to group, and they serve as a president, a treasurer, secretary, and then they move on perhaps to another group. So I think for people to think that this is going to be the godsend and everybody will come together on this is a little perhaps naive or unrealistic. I think, and in talking to address some of Bruce's points, that, and I think Commissioner Davis outlined it very, very well, I didn't view the department's role as forming this group and trying to run it. I think that what you folks were trying to do, and listening to the commission meeting that was broadcast, was to provide a vehicle for us as sportsmen to come together. And that being said, again, with the small number of people that are actually getting involved and trying to tackle many of the problems that we've outlined here this evening, I would perhaps propose, and going back to what Commissioner Davis said regarding a summit, would be a quarterly, or perhaps more often, summit of the leaders of all the groups that are currently active in the state. There's no need to start another group to address the same issues that many of the groups are trying to address today, where the department has the opportunity to communicate to us. The sportsman group has the opportunity to communicate to the department. We could discuss things like rules, like proposed legislation, issues. Many of the things are outlined in there where people are feeling a problem with the commission. I think that the Habitat Partnership Committee is an excellent example of various sportsmen's groups coming together, meeting several times during the year, the funding meeting, and again at the local HPC meetings, and coming up with solutions and identifying ways to spend the money that many of these sportsmen's group raise through the tag auctions and things. the last thing many of us as leaders of our respective groups is to want to attend more meetings. Most of us don't get paid for attending meetings, and to think about having monthly meetings and serving on more boards and more committees and subcommittees and everything else wears thin after the first 15 or 20 years. And I'm not so sure that there's a great many new people willing to step up to some of those responsibilities. And so if we could take the current groups that are already active, already formed, already have a board of directors, they have a mission, they have a purpose, they have goals in mind. In many cases, they communicate already with the department. But I do think there is a lack of communicating amongst themselves. This could provide the vehicle to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. While you're at that microphone, I'm going to ask a quick question, just so I can get a pulse of the room. How many folks here are affiliated with a group in some fashion? Representing. Sorry, I should clarify. Representing.
Oh.
How many people are not affiliated? Okay. So we have a pretty good mix. Doing this idea and getting the board of directors, we definitely get the affiliated group. But one of our bullet points there was getting the unaffiliated group. And I would ask this group collectively to think, how do we tap into those folks who don't necessarily go to those meetings or participate in that. So
I actually thought about that a little bit, and if we were to start a new group to represent the unaffiliated people, well, all of a sudden they'd be in a group. So why not get with one of the groups that already exist and up and running? And groups aren't for everybody, but to understand that in order to be more successful in addressing and voicing your goals and opinions, you can probably do that in a group a little bit more successfully than you can on your own.
okay. Well, we'll have to get together on the break and talk about what would it be, AHAA, the Unaffiliated Hunters and Anglers of Arizona group. Okay. Yeah.
My name's Alan Taylor. I was here at the first meeting. I think we're getting the cart in front of the horse right now, and at least maybe it's only me that's uneducated as it relates to the political savvy, the political, what azgfd can do. We know what we just went through with the 2072, and I'm still unclear as to what the game department, what limitations it has, what political part it plays, and until really we know that at least one portion of your 4 bullet items, we as constituents that are non-azgfd employees really can't effectively attack anything or know what sort of support we can get from the game department. So maybe a little education as to what political role the game department can play so that it would help us formulate plans and maybe subcommittees within the Sportsman's constituent groups.
Okay. Well, the question that you're answering is bifold. You have the commission that has some abilities that the department doesn't have, and vice versa. So I guess I'll turn it over. Can we put you on the spot to answer a few of those questions, or if another commissioner would like to do it, and then we'll turn a minute or two over to Gary to kind of handle the department side?
It's a great question. The commission does have the ability to support, oppose, legislation. The department has representatives at the legislature because they're dealing with technical aspects of bills all the time, and they also fulfill the mission of the commission as well. And so they are an active part. There are fine lines about what the department can do. The department's not going to go down there and start weighing in on bills on tax cuts and things like that, because it's not germane to the, and I know you can always make the argument that a bill is germane to the department, but in general it's not germane. But the commission does and has and will take positions on legislation as a matter of routine, but it also goes to the earlier question, and I'll shut up, which is a separate entity can do whatever it wants without any, it doesn't have to live with the machinations of dealing with the executive, dealing with the legislature. They can just take clear and concise positions on legislation. So if you argue the advantage over time of having an entity that is on its own, that would be one of the arguments in favor. I mean, a clear and convincing argument from my perspective.
Thank you.
I know this button well, so. And I'm Gary Hobatter, the Deputy Director. I've talked to at least half the folks in this room and met most of you, but in an effort to not have to cuddle with Lauren, I'll try to make this real quick. I'm very much the mechanics guy on this sort of thing, and I think basically here's some of the situations when it comes to legislative issues. The department has in Title 17 in statute by law, and there's also additional law in state statute that prohibits illegal political activity by department employees, and in the state law, overarching state law of state employees to get involved in illegal political activity. The basics of that, there are interesting, somewhat blurry lines around some of those issues, but basically what it comes down to this is that if it is proposed legislation for the department does not take positions on legislation. The commission has the authority to take positions on legislation. We get a lot of questions about what is the department's position. Our position is whatever the commission tells us its position is on legislation. This would be somewhat similar to ballot initiatives or legislative initiatives that reach the ballot, citizens initiatives or legislative initiatives. So if something is proposed legislation, we are not permitted. And we know this from when we have crossed or gotten too close to that line on a couple of occasions in the last 10 years. We're not permitted to come out and say, this is a bad bill, go oppose it. This is a good bill, go support it. Similarly, on ballot initiatives, once the Secretary of State accepts a ballot initiative and says, I have the signatures necessary for this to appear on the ballot, at that point, the department has nothing more to say. It is illegal political activity for a department or state employee to weigh in for or against that ballot initiative. If it is a legislative initiative to go to the ballot, it's the same situation. Once it gets passed and accepted to go to the ballot, we go silent. So what that does mean, though, is that when we have legislative initiatives that are ongoing, we do have two of our folks who are registered to address the legislature on legislative issues, Tony Giles and Jorge Kanaka. And we are, on the one hand, not permitted to engage in illegal political activity. On the other hand, we are required to provide information to our constituents about issues of the day and required to provide information to the legislature and the governor when they ask us questions. So we spend considerable amounts of time down there talking those issues. The commission also sets the agenda for legislation that they think would be beneficial for the sportsmen and women of Arizona, the anglers, the hunters, the shooters, OHV users, watercraft, and other related constituents. And so there will be work to find bill sponsors who will, in fact, who think that agenda makes sense and that they would then craft and propose legislation. But that has to be the act of a legislator. It's not the act of a commissioner or the act of a department staffer. So the thing that's become a challenge, one of the reasons why the issue of a political action committee always seems to come up, is because if you've got a battle to fight, if there's a ballot initiative comes up to say, you can't hunt deer in Arizona. We obviously, as a department, I think this is what's confusing to a lot of folks. It confuses us sometimes. We obviously, as a department, have a huge interest in that. But if it's accepted by the Secretary of State, we're silent. We've got nothing to say about it. And at that point, the only people who could pick up the ball and run with it are citizens of Arizona who either are already formed as groups or form as groups to go, and they have to then battle on that front to accomplish what they want to accomplish for Arizona wildlife. So I don't know if that made it much clearer, but
by Title 17, which is the main governing law for Arizona Game and Fish, we have in that title that illegal political activity by the department employees is grounds for immediate dismissal. So we will work every legal venue available to us to make the wishes of our constituents known on these issues. But there are lines we absolutely will not cross, and we will not push up hard against.
Does that more or less answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Bob?
Tom Macon was correct that there are all these groups that are out there, but there is also the vast majority of hunters and anglers in this state are unaffiliated. And I think the answer to that question is very simple. One is that it is the responsibility. Let me back up. The North American Conservation Model, one of its precepts is the use of science, good science, to make wildlife management decisions. Most of us grew up thinking in terms of biological science. There is a considerable body of social science and the ability to do good social science to find out what me, as an unaffiliated hunter, would expect from the agency and that. And so I think Tom's right. I think you need to bring those groups together to talk about issues. But one of the things is that the responsibility of the department is to do good social science, to present to those groups, to show the balance of those of us who are not affiliated.
And one other thing, because this also is, I've had a lot of conversations over the years with constituents who've wondered why we have had to act the way we have on some legislative issues. While the commission has the legal authority to be much more involved in political activity, for example, once a bill is passed, they can oppose a bill. They can oppose a ballot initiative. They cannot use department resources to help them do it. So the administrative support that they can call on when I do a memo for the commission to some issue, I can't do that anymore if it's political activity. I can't use a department truck to go do something engaged in that political activity. So what that also means is that very often the commission, in my experience, does go to various constituency groups for assistance in fighting those political battles, because that's where they can get source of manpower and source of troops to help fight a fight, because they cannot call on the department staff to do that for them anymore.
Thank you.
That was an excellent CYA statement.
Bob, as the guy who heads up the social science research in Game and Fish, I can assure you that we do good science.
Historically, we have not always done good science.
Historically, I've not always been here. But I assure you, everything that comes out of my shop is good science.
But the point being is that there are two things we can do.
The webcasters can't hear you.
The point being that that the thrust of this probably should be two ways. It should be what Tom recommends in bringing the constituency groups together, and the second part of that is that the department take the lead in doing social science to understand those of us who are not part of those groups, and who oftentimes, my experience in 40 plus years of working in wildlife is that oftentimes the constituency groups, the groups, have a very different opinion than the unaffiliated people, and we both need to understand it. But if we could get together, we would provide a very powerful voice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a couple comments based on what Gary said. So in I'm not very politically educated. I work in the business world. But when someone makes a proposal, much like legislation, there are clear impacts of that legislation. You can communicate impacts without necessarily taking a position. And it seems unfortunate we've got resources within the department at the legislature, who maybe have access, I may or may not have access to impacts. And then we've got people on the commission that have the flexibility to, comment on those. So, it really seems, where's that line determined, whether something is, whether you're communicating an impact or whether you're taking a position, or do you just say, we don't want to go there and we're not going to comment at all? Because I think that's kind of what.
Honestly, it's less complex than it sounds. The department is asked, as many people are in a legislative process, for their expertise about impacts, costs, those kinds of things, and they're straightforward answers. If you do X, it's going to cost this much, and it's going to take this much resource, and it could have this negative consequence, it could have this positive consequence. You, the legislator, decide which side of, is the impact worth it, not worth it. And so it's really not, now the commission can sit there and contemplate, as the commission does, whether they think this bill has a negative impact on the department, negative impact on Sportsman, negative impact on the habitat, on wildlife, and can forcefully voice opposition or support, as long as there's 3 out of 5 that say this is the direction that we think we want to pronounce. This is what we feel. But 99%, the expertise is the true value. When the team from the department goes down and provides information, it lets legislators make, most of the time, and I know it's not how we read it in the paper, but most of the time fairly thoughtful decisions, weighing these consequences. Sometimes they don't turn out how I'd like it to be, but they did weigh those consequences. But the commission can be as forceful as it wants, other than using department resources. You can't run a campaign out of the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and you wouldn't want your taxpayers' resources doing that. But they can actively work with affiliated, non-affiliated groups against or for something, and by and large, and where sometimes we may need to improve is that piece of it in that work, in trying to make sure that we have organized support or organized opposition to things that truly could impact all of us on the ground. But from a legislative standpoint, they do a great job every day of providing relevant, scientific, economic information to decision makers. And it's really not as complicated as it sounds. They're expert witnesses at a trial, I guess, if you really wanted to think of it in that terms.
Okay. And just one quick comment regarding the summit. I'll be brief. I don't know, if there was a summit in November, December, is that sufficient time for things to be worked out prior to the next legislation session?
Because from my perspective, and again, usually September, October, people's ideas are germinating, but they may not actually be down in writing in technical language. So what happens is, a lot of times if you're talking in September, you're talking concepts, but sometimes you're talking past each other. But come November, December, it's actually in statutory, it's in actually how it would be in the statute. And sometimes people notice unintended consequences that wasn't really the sponsor's idea, but here's what will also be impacted. So sometimes it's best to have that language if possible, so you're having a conversation about actually what would show up in the law. And that's why I would argue that time frame is, because that's usually when people actually have their first or second drafts of actual statutory language. Doesn't mean you can't have one the quarterly concept idea. It's interesting to me because that allows you to have the concept discussion and then have the statutory conversation.
Far be it from me to come talk to a microphone.
Could you state your name and affiliation, please?
My name is Jack Husted, and I'm a commissioner with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And it's a fine line, and you guys have been real masterful at defining it. But when we go back a couple of years to the Prop 109, when we tried to put a constitutional amendment, Chairman Woodhouse and I were actually chairman of that effort. We headed the campaign to see that ballot initiative passed. We failed miserably, and I wanted to discuss a bit why we failed miserably. Some of the people in the middle who don't particularly aren't involved. You know, they want to go hunting, and by our very nature, we want to go hunting. We're passionate about hunting and fishing, and we want to go into the woods and be left alone. But unfortunately, we live in a day and age. We're in the 5th generation since Bambi, and those that fairy tale has cost us dearly. And so I had constituents very upset. You people right here, the license buyers, very upset that the fact that the agency wasn't supporting us, wasn't putting out factual information, wasn't trying to pass this. Well, it's illegal. As Gary just mentioned, it's illegal. And so, hence, the effort that we're trying to create here, that Kurt's putting you all together, and we're trying to figure out a way to involve those hunters who want to be left alone, but had dang sure better engaged, because we're fixing to lose what we have and what we have enjoyed for generations. The North American model is a generation away from collapsing because of those people in the middle. And I'm not chastising you, but that communication, the bottom line in that in the thing from the first meeting, is important, and we need to communicate to those people who just don't want to come to meetings. And we have to understand, you know, we can be out there leading a charge. A commissioner, we're appointed by the governor, and we get to do certain things that state employees can't. We can put out facts, but we can't put out a campaign. And that's what we need our constituents for. And so I just maybe thought maybe the 109 would be a good example to kind of show that delineation. And we missed a great opportunity there. And I don't think HSUS or anybody will be sleeping next time. They woke up in time to beat us because we were pretty misunderstood in that effort. I had people calling me at the 11th hour saying, "Why are you backing that stupid proposition?" So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jack.
As always. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Hector Albaron. I'm here on behalf of CoosWhitetail.com. Right now, I just want to state that my expectations for this group are pretty open. I think myself, as well as many here, are, here to see where this is going. How much of a voice are we going to have? How much are we going to be listened to? That is going to dictate how much we get involved. We definitely have some people that are wanting to be involved, such as myself. Very good points brought up. The legislative summit, the different agendas that the different groups have, the proposition that didn't go through. All of that and all that communication within those groups can work. But again, back to that bullet number 4, communication, I think, in order for everything to work, we have to have an infrastructure to get the word out to young Arizona, out to Wilcox, et cetera, et cetera. We have to have the means to facilitate that communication. And what I'd like to see is some brainstorming amongst us to, a lot of us have good ideas on how that can happen. Myself being very involved with the website, see that as an avenue, but not everyone gets online. A lot of people say, the bumper stickers. Well, not everybody has, in these small towns, has access to getting one or what it means or anything like that. And we learned a very hard lesson with this last bill that tried to go through, where most of the people that I spoke with and such about what was going on had absolutely no clue. And again, they would go back to stating that there was nothing on the Game and Fish website, for instance, which we know why, but a lot of people don't. And they rely on the department to get that word out. And maybe we can come up with some way, somehow, to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. As we continue on, I'll let you go, and I'd like to begin the discussion of, in the context of the purpose and the vision that we kind of talked about tonight. What should the name of this group be? I'd like to start that conversation off after you have your say there.
I'm Perry Chisholm, a lifetime native of Arizona. And I just want to relate a little experience that points out from some of the previous speakers. One time the commission had a big discussion pointedly about quail, and more specifically Burns quail. And that's one of my passions. And I came to the meeting prepared to give my 2 cents worth. Well, the organizations took the whole time. I took 2-3 hours out of my busy business life, and I never got to say a word. Never got to say a word. I want all of us to remember this, is that maybe the organizations are already represented in lobbying and in with the commissioners and everything. It's the individuals that need to be heard. Because after all, we're here to promote our passion to your kids, your grandkids, my great-grandkids. And if we don't get that done, they're not going to have a place to go hunt. Just drive down in southeastern Arizona today and see all the no hunting signs. And you know there's open land behind those ranches, but you can't get through them. Because these are people that come in from out of state, and they don't want to hunt, and they stop us from hunting. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Christine Smith. I'm just representing myself. And to get back to the original question, I think the vision's already stated here under your purpose. We just need to change out the first sentence so that we're not just discussing, but we're actually acting upon issues. The items you listed up there can serve as our objectives, and we can go forward. I agree with a lot of the different discussions we've had today, and it's very exciting that the department or the commission did bring us together. However it works out in the long run, at least we have a place to have a voice. As someone not part of a group, that was desperately missing when we found out about this most recent proposition. One thing I'd like to add to the objectives is also outreach, and part of that is just regarding diversity. If you look around the room today, it's not just our age groups that are well represented, and we're missing youth, but it's also, I come from a neighborhood that is probably 80% Hispanic and quite a few African American, and that's our future as well, and they should be in the room here. So I would just add that as far as our outreach. And the communication, I think, is absolutely key. We talked about the website, but you're right, reaching areas that don't have technology, it was pretty scary. How do we connect with each other when there's a red alert out there, per se? So I'm looking forward to being part of this group.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's address the name of this group, and then we'll go ahead and break for just a few moments here. So let's go ahead and have some people come up to the microphone. If you like the name as is, if you propose a change, keeping it in the context of the vision that we kind of talked about, what do you think?
Actually, I have a question. When we first met, there was discussions about people that do birding or Audubon, and this was supposed to be a united effort. I don't know if that's still of interest, because if we have different groups like that involved, would they be offended by this type of name, or is it considered inclusive? I don't know the answer to that. So you guys might.
I'll take a crack at that. Sorry about that. I'll take a crack at it. When the commission.
Contract matters.
When the commission, and Jack is here who made the actual motion, when the commission had this conversation at the time, it was to focus on sportsmen, and I don't want to say somebody's not a sportsman, but I believe that the objective of the commission, doesn't mean that you may come up with a different idea, was to really focus on first on this consumptive users, the sportsmen, and try to bring that constituency together. Now, again, at the end of the day, this becomes your organization, and you may have a different idea about that. So but I'm just trying to give you relevance of what the discussion was at that time.
Ask for hands. Do they agree with the name?
I'm sorry. Show of hands.
Vote.
Show of hands? Okay. As is, it's
I just want to, I haven't had any time to think about it. I don't know, like she said, it's
would you mind hopping up to the microphone so the folks online can hear you?
the first time anybody's ever asked me to talk to the mic.
And we may never do it again.
They probably never will. I tell you, watch your ears. So I understand what she's saying. Are you limiting things by using the word sportsman? Should it be outdoorsman? Because hiking, for all technical purposes, is outdoors, but it's not particularly, I don't know, in the sportsman's group. I mean, I don't see it that way. So if you're looking to unify people with groups or without groups, you're looking at, this is not just a hunting issue. It's not just a fishing issue. It's a land issue. It's a game management issue. It's a protecting your rights regardless of whether they're hunting or hiking. So you're looking at involving people that just like to hike or people that go camping and never pay for those campsites. So, I mean, I think sportsman's limiting, very limited. I think you're looking at more for an outdoorsman, and you're try to simplify things a little bit. If we have another Arizona outdoorsman anything in the phone book, we're going to be, bogged down. But yeah, we don't need any more of that. But I think outdoorsman is probably more rounded. To me, it's more rounded. It kind of speaks to everyone who uses outdoors for whatever.
Okay.
I broke it.
Any other ideas or comments?
Mr. Commissioner, members of the department, members of the audience. I'm Blaine Bickford. I'm from Springerville, Arizona. I'm not sure we're ready to pick a name. I'm not sure we've defined what we want to represent. Could I be called a consumptive user? Yes, I can. Conservationist? Yes. A photographer, a hiker, an equestrian. I utilize the outdoors so does my family in a multitude of adventures. A name can limit us. It can put us in a box. It can be a positive. It can be a negative. I don't think we're there yet. I think we have to develop this a little bit more, talk amongst ourselves, and come up with a different, maybe not a different name. Sportsman, I'm not so sure about. Now, I look around and I see some folks that I built sheep tanks with, pulled fence. Now, we do this in the name of an antelope project, a desert sheep project, But what are we really benefiting here? Sheep, yes. Antelope, yes. How about wildlife? Every species that can come and benefit from that. So as we go forward, what are we? We're not just a consumptive user when we do these projects or we take on legislation. We're here looking for the wildlife of the state of Arizona, for the future generations, not just of the state, but the United States and the world. So when we pick a name, let's think about what we truly do. And I think when we look amongst ourselves, we'll realize that we do look for all wildlife. My comment.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my comment is kind of dovetails into his. It sounded like, based on some of the earlier comments, way too much, but I can't talk from my seat, so I get to stand up here. So real quick, constituency. I know that when Gary was talking about communication protocols, what we can do, what we can't do, constituents was one of the words that it sounded like that was like a legal term that permitted some level of communication. So is constituency, does calling this a constituency, kind of clarify certain capabilities that wouldn't ordinarily be as clear? I mean, to me, it sounds like wildlife constituency kind of covers the bases. As Blaine said, it's about the wildlife, and if these are, if this group represents constituents, we're kind of covering the bases with both those words. So I would argue that would be a better name.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Kurt, did you want to take the constituent comment?
Just to try to add a little food for thought as you think about it. If it's too wide of a definition, then the ability to accomplish some things in the short term and the long term become much more complicated, because then you end up in a longer discussion about it's kind of like for example, we have a wonderful organization, the Hog, that people point to all the time as doing a great job, and they do a great job, and they're focused on a particular aspect, and they try to achieve specific objectives in a not, I want to call it narrow, but a more narrow focus. And so the only thing I would be careful with is if it gets too broad, then the ability to accomplish anything can become more difficult. And that's why I think the Commission's conversation tried to be a little bit more specific. But again, I just throw it in there as food for thought.
Okay. We are about 15 minutes overdue for a break. So what I might propose is we've talked about Sportsman's constituency group, we've talked about Outdoorsman's constituency group, as well as Wildlife constituency group. I would go ahead and propose that we break until 22, and as you are intermingling and discussing amongst yourself, go ahead and talk about it. Go introduce yourself to somebody you don't know and tell them what you think about it. So let's go ahead and break, and we'll come back at 22. 22 the hour.
Well, we had quail just You're a lot smarter than me. That's what I thought. Are you getting a feeling in this discussion? That's how I nobody said you. What do you think? That's what you mistaken. You can't force everybody to do that. But you can put it out. Say about it. I got more people here. I won't mess with them. gotta give you the whole. Unless they've heard something, trout fisher, elk, crab, you screw it over the southern part of the state, and you're getting crab apple strip that's everywhere. I'm gonna go tell some guys to speak. Very nice people. It could fall. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. That's right, I'm looking for somebody.
A lot of them. I'm sure they got more in the back. We're all out.
Let's take about a minute to finish up those conversations and we'll get going.
We do have things, so we can lose every hour. I'm hoping we can help the first weekend. Really good at it. Yeah, I know. Remember, he was out. Yeah, he was out there today. He was the one that said, yeah.
All right. So your homework for the break was to introduce yourself to somebody you didn't know and tell them what you thought on the name. Let's hear from some folks. You got shot down? Remind me what yours was? Outdoorsman, something other than sportsman. Okay. How about from this side?
Arizona Outdoor Alliance.
Arizona Outdoor Alliance. Yes.
I thought I'd get to the microphone just so everyone out there in the cyber world could hear us as well. I really like Blaine's suggestion about using the word wildlife in the name, but I think that we could probably just dispense with the whole naming thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how everybody else feels about it. The name of this group will be important, but I don't think it's critical to what we're trying to accomplish tonight. And I think, our agenda says that at break time we were going to be done talking about name. And so I think maybe we could defer name to later when we have a little bit more definition about what we're about, and maybe move on more to the substantive things of what we're going to be doing in the immediate future, like the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you ruined my trick. I was using a crafty moderating trick to bridge the gap to get us onto those things, but since you ruined it for us, we'll go ahead and move on for that. I'm just kidding.
But let me add, because I think because the issue is brought up, and I agree with let's move on. But one of the things I know that some of the commissioners have talked about is, and I hate using these terms because I just don't like the terminology, but doing something similar with some of the non-consumptive, and I don't like that word, entities as well. So maybe this one that we if you'd afford me the ability to take it back and talk to the commissioners about, again, what the intent was, and then if you all end up changing that, that'll be your business, but also in concept of what we had talked about previously about some non-consumptive, again, I hate that terminology, but non-consumptive interest as well that may have issues they want to work on and that kind of thing. So if that's fair, we could move on then, I guess.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. The next topic that we need to look at is the steering committee, both the form and the function of the steering committee. And I think what I'd like to start out with the function of that steering committee, because once we hammer down what the function of that steering committee will be, that'll kind of self-define what form it will take. So I'd be very much interested in hearing from you if a steering committee is desirable by you folks, if that's something you'd like to do, and if so, what function it would serve.
And put it in context, one of the things that you talked about last meeting, and again, this is where we're trying to listen. Several of you mentioned, you're pounded with meetings, and that is absolutely understood. So knowing that, how are you respectful of people's time? And then there are certain people that, that may choose to want to participate in a steering committee that right at this time in their life can provide more of their time, where somebody else would rather just stay in the larger group and work at it from that perspective. And that may change for people over time. But that was the thought process, because many of you brought up, you're engaged in a lot of things and you work on a lot of different projects and you don't have endless amounts of time. So we're trying to figure out how to be respectful of that. And as you know, most successful entities have some form or another of that kind of organizational structure. So that was the context of how it came out of the last meeting.
Hi, my name is Terry Herndon. I'm speaking tonight as the regional director for the Mule Deer Foundation. As far as steering committee go, I think it's very important that we have a group that's going to speak for all, not just for sportsmen's groups. I think that if we were to have a steering committee that had somebody other than, let's say, the Mule Deer Foundation, Arizona Elk Society, or have those plus 4 or 5 other folks that could get together and talk. Secondly, on the steering committee, I think it's their job to communicate as well as they can to anybody that's interested in this group. Whatever we're going to call this group, the Night Constituency group, should be something that we take names down and have a huge email blast and tell anybody who wants to know what's going on. And that should be part of the steering group to do that, because we already heard that the Game and Fish Department can't get involved with political issues. It's against the rules. So if we, as a group, were to find out about these new laws that affects all of us, including anything like the Monument of the Grand Canyon, things like that, it should be blasted out to everybody who needs to know. It's going to be up to them to follow through and possibly get back with the steering committee, or possibly find out what they can do to fight any of these ideas that they don't care to see come about. But the most important part is the communication. We have none. Communication is the lacking part, and communication is king. So with that said, I think the steering committee should be the ones to take care of that.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. What other functions should they do? I got from Terry's take-home messages are they need to be representative, and their function would be communication. What else? I hear record keeping over here. Shout them out. I'll repeat them. You don't have to go up to the microphone.
I think it should be also a part of the committee to get back to the Game and Fish Department and let them understand where the groups are coming from. So let them know where their thoughts are and what their concerns are.
Okay. So maybe an extension of your original idea of not only communication between the groups, but also with the department as well. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. What else?
Maintain transparency with both the department and the general public.
Okay. Maintain transparency with the department and the public. Okay. Legislation.
Outreach and regional outlook.
Outreach and regional outlook.
Getting out to the regions.
Okay.
Building a statewide perspective.
Okay. The statewide perspective. What else? Shout them out.
I think the steering committee ought to set the direction for the group, and then maybe make some assignments to individuals that want to participate to carry out specific action plans so that we can actually accomplish the things we set out to do.
Okay, so one of the roles would be delegating whatever those hot topics that we identify to members of the larger group as a whole. Okay. And setting direction, did I miss that part? Okay.
That goes to bullet 3, where if you look at the comments, I mean, there's a ton of good perspectives and ideas. They got to be prioritized. I mean, there's no way to. So I think to go to your point, that what you saw in bullet 3 is one of the necessities, in my opinion, of a steering committee.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Bruce Johnson. I guess I have a little concern about the whole concept of a steering committee, unless it's organized differently than many of the boards of directors of groups. First, I think that if you are going to have some leadership group like that, the people that serve on it should have limited tenure. They should be elected by all the members of the group, and the membership of the group, of the constituent group, should basically be open. You shouldn't have to sign up for it. You shouldn't have to send your name to the Game and Fish Department and get on a list that then is the email list for it. Part of the problem that resulted in this group getting together was a group that fulfilled many of the objectives that people just listed, and started out as a group to represent sportsmen and represent groups, and got way off track by being way too insular, not having any turnover. The people who were on that board of directors were there from the time that group started, and I was there at their organizational meetings back 5, 6, 7 years ago. I sure as heck don't want this to turn into something like that. So I think we have to be very careful. The most productive effort that Sportsman had recently was to defeat this recent legislation, and it had no leadership, none. It was a grassroots effort, and it spread by social media. Bob Hernbrod has talked about the social aspects of this thing. There weren't organized meetings. It was individuals volunteering to get things done, to write letters, to organize campaigns. You don't have to have the traditional structure to get something done, and traditional structures tend to work into the same kind of bureaucracies as other traditional structures and can wind up with the same sort of problems. So I hope to heck if we do this that it's a different type of steering committee, something that really, really is answerable to the members, whether they be members of organizations or the well over 100,000 sportsmen out there who are not members of any organization. So I just think we have to be real careful about that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just, the steering committee, are we viewing that as a prioritization type of a group, or is that a communication? I mean, are they taking a communication role? Because you could potentially have subcommittees that maybe are independently directed, and then, you know, reporting status and what they view as their priorities up for communication by a centralized steering committee.
Yeah, you ask what I perceive as what's going to go. Doesn't matter what I think. This is your group. How would you like it to be? Help me get a feel for the room as far as steering committee. This is steering committee is a really good idea. This is steering committee is just kind of a so-so idea. So kind of give me a range of where we're at here. Wait, you guys can't agree on anything, can you?
And that's why I think the steering committee is important, because somebody has got to, you know, grab the bull by the horns and figure out how we're going to get this thing moving forward. Otherwise, we're going to come in here and have meetings like this for years and never really do anything. So somewhere along the way, some group of people is going to have to sit down and say, these are the things we're going to tackle now. This is how we're going to tackle it. And who wants to work on it?
I heard the other concept of subcommittees. Same question. Subcommittees is a great idea. Subcommittees is a so-so idea. Maybe.
Well,
I don't understand the difference.
right. I think that's you can have both. I mean, you don't necessarily, I don't believe you're choosing one or the other. You can certainly have both. I would argue to you a steering committee is important for two reasons. One is, if the objective here is to form a group that goes on and may determine to go on by itself from all the previous stuff we discussed, there's going to be a period of planning to do that, a period of things that have to be, infrastructure that has to be done to be successful in that endeavor, from my perspective. Second is the prioritization, so that there is some immediate actions that people can sit back and say, this actually helped, was successful. That may involve subcommittees. And to avoid burning out everybody, I agree with the comment that it shouldn't be a lifetime appointment. I think you can have that done. In my perspective, we're looking at a year's horizon right now. And then you determine whether it's worth keeping it going, separate, sole and separate, some interface, all those things are going to be decisions that you would make. And the steering committee is going to have to work on the infrastructure for you to be able to make those choices and those decisions. Because I don't think, I agree, you can't do it in large meetings all the time. Large meetings are important, but also there's that work that goes on in between time.
You're going to have a lot of different ideas. Somebody's going to take the bull by the horn and prioritize things to work on. This is a major issue we need to start with. This is the second issue, third issue.
Great.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
To that point, I do think the subcommittees can naturally identify who's on the steering committee if each of these subcommittees have some type of leader, even if the leader changes depending on what that group is tackling at the time. And then it would be up to that steering committee to communicate what's coming out of these groups to the commission or to the department. It all depends if you're going to have 3 subcommittees or 10. Just that might be a natural flow.
We have those 4 bullet points up there on that slide. To me, those are the 4 subcommittees, and if people in this room are interested in working on those topics, then maybe they ought to just get together as a group and then amongst themselves pick somebody that they want to be the spokesperson for that subcommittee, and that becomes the person that sits on the steering committee to help prioritize and communicate.
Okay, so what you're proposing is 4 subcommittees, each having to do with the previous bullet points, and then those subcommittees send a few delegates, for lack of a better word, and those delegates as a whole constitute the steering committee? Okay.
The one thing to keep in mind as you contemplate that is we have people that are viewing this on the web. We have people that are not here in town that may want to be involved. Jack mentioned, and I totally agree, you have to have, regional perspective as well. And I from my, that gets into making sure there's an organized structure where we are sensitive to that.
Good evening. My name is Jim DeVos, and I'm representing myself this evening. One of the things that
find anybody to pay for it tonight either, huh?
I couldn't. You know what? I'm still working on that. I figure if I speak,
You said that last meeting.
if I speak every time, maybe somebody will see some value might be in here. I don't know, or perhaps not. A couple of thoughts. One is I think it's absolutely essential in the short term, if we use Kurt's horizon of a year, that we maintain a strong relationship with the department. And I see that for a number of reasons. First of all, the infrastructure that we've talked about. Someone said there was 45 of us here this evening. You're welcome to my house, but 6 of us can enjoy the atmosphere there, not 45. So we've got to have a place to meet. There was a tremendous amount of staff work done between last meeting and this meeting. And in the short term, who's going to do that if we don't have the department to rely on? Bob Hermbrode spoke of social science, and while I believe that's important, I also think that having that bridge to the department for the hard wildlife science is also a critical step that this group needs. 50 years ago, when the science of wildlife management was just developing, few universities were producing graduates. At that time, when the department spoke and those few trained people spoke, everybody believed them. Government has changed to where nobody believes government anymore, and every university has got 50 graduates a semester. Some of them can go to work in agencies. Some of them are biologists for hire or the consultant thing. I will assure you that the groups that do not value what we in this room value have biologists on their staff, full-time people that are advising them on positions, advising them on tacks to take for the nomination of Grand Canyon National Monument, for wolf issues. The wildlife conservation organizations don't have those staff biologists, and if we lose contact with the department and don't rely on the department to provide us with the best available science, in spite of what we talked about the legislative process and legal constraints, the department does do briefings. Those briefings are available to the constituency groups to look at and evaluate the science as we take positions. So logistically, we need the department. I think from a science standpoint, both social, that's for you.
I'm plugging in.
Social science and actually for the hard science and perhaps more importantly for the logistics to get things going so that we've got someone that can say, hey, you know what, we need a meeting, or here's the minutes from the last meeting, until this group grows sufficient legs, if it does, to be able to do those things on its own. I don't see it being there at this point of time. So important to keep ties, strong ties between this group, whatever it morphs into, and the department for those purposes.
Okay, thank you. So to paraphrase your comments, you perceive the department acting as, I guess, training wheels, for lack of a better word, and then what? Facilitator. Okay. Okay. Thank you for those comments. Anything else on that topic? Okay. What form should that steering committee take then? We have one proposal of creating several subcommittees, and then those delegates then create the steering committee. What other forms would you guys propose? Do we need to shout it out again and me repeat it? We can do that.
I would assume that the commission had some sort of design, so I'd be curious to hear what their conceptual designs was on this Sportsman's constituent group.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear from the commission what their original intention was.
I think the honest answer, and Jack can fill in, I don't believe there was a design in mind at the time. It was really to start bringing people together, have a focus, then over time that group may decide to move onto its own. Again, I would argue to you, one is you got to figure out who's really willing, to be on a steering committee and commit that time level. And then of those who are willing, how do you make sure that we have geographic representation? We have, all those things that are important. And their job, from my perspective, is a year enterprise, or 9 months or 10 months, whatever you want to call it. And then that it will make itself apparent of how something may want to be organized permanently, and what linkages it does and doesn't have. That will all become self-evident as that group goes forward. And using subcommittees as part of that group for projects, I think, is a very bright, smart idea, because again, more people committing time. And don't give yourself credit. There's a good number of folks here tonight, and you've been active in lots of issues, and then you're taking the time to be active in this. So again, I think from my perspective, that's, unless Jack, you feel differently, there was no preconceived, this is how it should be.
I believe the topic of the day was the bill that had so polarized the sportsman's community that it was very concerning to me. On the heels, we talked about the defeat of 109, and kind of in a spirit of united we stand and divided we fall. We have archers and we have muzzleloaders, and everybody wants their piece of the pie allocation, and so in that spirit, we tasked Kurt with trying to put us all in the same organization, the same mindset when things of interest, or somebody called them a red flag issue. I think somebody called it a red flag issue that we need to have. If the department can't do it, and they're looking to us to do something more than a factual dissemination that maybe borderlines on political activity, we need somebody to carry the message and factually help us do our job and save hunting and fishing. And so to that point, we didn't have any preconceived notion, but the subcommittee, whether it be one to look at communication, one to look at, there's a bunch of people online tonight. listening to this, and you know, I can barely do my emails, but there are people who live on that medium, and we should recognize that. The whitetail.com was here, and so we need your help, because some of us might not quite be dinosaurs, but are approaching that.
I'm a young guy.
Yeah. But anyway, that was kind of the origin, and it was, you know, let's get the sportsmen and women on the same page, and dancing to the same sheet of music. So there is no commission order, and that was the neat thing. I'm making a plea for help as a commissioner. We need your help. We are nothing without you, and we're nothing without your support license-wise. So we need to expand on both of those issues.
Okay. As we were shouting out each one of these purposes and our objectives of the group, I heard outreach. I heard a bunch of others that Doug was able to capture. What I might recommend to this group, and let me know what your thoughts are on it, is to take each one of those issues that were raised, and the steering committee can address each one of those, and should they deem that particular activity worthwhile, they can then assign one person to kind of be in charge of that one thing and head up that effort. Is that all right if we do that? I'm not hearing a lot of objectives.
I agree.
Okay, that way we
got to start someplace. Yeah. I mean, tonight we're sitting here, we're into it now. How many hours? I mean, there's not really been any decisions made, and the only way we're going to go forward with this is we're going to have to make decisions now and try them. And if they don't work, we can always realign and try something different. But something has to come out of this meeting tonight to make this thing go.
okay. Go ahead.
I agreed with what Bruce had to say. There's always a concern with something like that, with any organization being set up. We could take our government and look at it and see how everybody has warm and fuzzies or doesn't have warm and fuzzies. But we've got to do something, I think. And I think that we have to, yes, have some sort of steering committee. I don't know how many bodies we need to have, if it's 5, 7, 10. And I think that steering committee then is going to go ahead and prioritize and set up subcommittees, because one gentleman back here talked about having regional influence. I mean, we're going to have to do some traveling. We're going to have to do some talking. There's going to be a lot of footwork here, and quite frankly, 5 to 7 to 10 people are not going to have enough hours in the day to do it all. They'd have to quit their full-time jobs. That being said, we need to set up a steering committee of some sort, and we have to ask ourselves, how do we select the steering committee? So those are a couple questions. We got to move this forward, I think, so that we can actually have some meat and potatoes to deal with.
Let me throw out something on that. I think, again, people can self-select, or you can nominate. If you've got somebody that you think should be at least contacted and find out if they'd be willing, you might have somebody say, this person would be great, so I'm going to nominate them, and hopefully they'll say yes. Or you can self-select, I'm willing to. And from that list, we're going to know who's really willing to give that kind of time commitment. And we can then look at that list from also a regional perspective and bring it back to you with, here's what we think. And I don't care if we email it to all of you and say, here's what we think. And you can respond to that. Because personally, I envision the next meeting not being here. That's my own personal viewpoint. And we talked about that in the beginning too. We've got to bring some of this out on the road as well. But first step to me is self-selection or nomination or a combo of both. Because if you don't personally want to, there's nothing wrong with that, then the only way to know is if people say I do, and if they have somebody they want to nominate. Yeah, I guess and Mitzel, if I have it wrong, I view everyone that's here, and many of you have come for 2, some of you have come now for 1. Anybody that's here is a member. I mean, you've already taken time out of your schedule to come. You're a member. And then we've got the next tier of folks that are willing to commit some other extra time. Doesn't mean we don't have these meetings. I believe these meetings are important too. Just in the interim, having a steering committee who's working on the specifics of this and helping create the long-term infrastructure so that this can work are two different applied amount of time. And so who's willing to really do that?
Okay. This gentleman, then we'll come right down here, okay?
Or I don't want to do the steering committee, but I'd be happy to be on a subcommittee. That may be a different.
Mr. Commissioner, members of the department, question concerning communication, and we've discussed the need to get to the people that aren't here. Is the department going to supply us a list of names and addresses of the people that are known to own watercraft, various special permits for falconry, hunting and fishing licenses, so we can have a mass mailing of communications? Or are we going to have to develop a funding source to purchase that?
Great question. And actually, I was pinging on Doug back here, who's IT branch chief. And I talked to Gary earlier of how do we quickly create a self-selection model. I think, you get into giving away people's information is one set of problems, and there's legal pieces to that and all that. You can see they're already talking about it. Self-selection is a different animal. And can we create so that you have the ability to cross-communicate, to go to your point about communication, can we create a self-selection model quickly that lets people opt in to be communicated with, and we can give those emails to you and different constituents.
Excuse me.
Can we put a flyer in with the fall hunt? Just like you do for doing the raffle and stuff, just put it in there. Say you want to join, boom, boom, send it in.
So that's the self-selection.
You get 10,000 people.
Correct.
Say yes, that's a huge percentage to start with.
Correct. It's a self-selection model. And I think that'd be the catch, right, Gary, is the self-selection.
And Mr. Commissioner, I think that works well. That's a model that we've used. I was going to say this because I want to make this goes into there's a privacy issue that we've been straddling for quite some time. We've been pushing real hard on our e-news. We've got 135,000 individual. That's not counting duplicates. 135,000 individual e-news subscribers right now. We're trying to push and push and push to get that because essentially that's kind of the British are coming, Paul Revere sort of process is what we envision for that. When we hit 250,000 subscribers, we become essentially the largest immediate media outlet in the state of Arizona. Right now our competition would be it's about 250,000 for the Arizona Republic. Another thing, the issue on email addresses, we have not released those. Took a position 2 years ago. The commission vetted that or blessed that we would go to court to defend that. The challenge is we cannot limit, if we release, we can't invoke state privacy law on our email address list if we provide that to a public entity. Once we do that, we have to provide it to anybody. And our challenge is that when those folks signed up for e-news or otherwise provide us that email address, it's generally for a purpose that, and if it's the e-news, they select, here's why we want to here's what we are giving you this address for. Our challenge, our concern is quite frankly, there's enough sophistication in the information world these days to, there could be groups that could destroy our ability to do that by demanding that list from us under open records because it's no longer defensible under privacy law. And then I will not perjure a group or pejorative, but there are groups that are rather antithetical to everything we're standing for here tonight that would love to try to drive people out of our connectivity with them by essentially using that email list to harass the folks whose names are on it. So we've stood that line pretty hard, but I would submit that the joint effort that this represents permits us to a point, and I refer back to C. Perrin's, the illegal political activity by the department. We can use all our mechanisms that are available to us now. I mean, folks are watching this online over the department's backbone. That's available for this process. We will put out on the internet I think we put out the tape for the last meeting. So our intention to put out the tape for this meeting so other folks can watch this. We can inform the public about what this group has done and decided to do. The challenge, and several of you have talked to me about this over the last month, has been that to the extent you become reliant on us doing that, when we get to that political activity trigger and we no longer can use department resources to legally do that, then suddenly, absent a group that's put itself together to pick up the ball and run with it, that becomes a problem. And that's my long-winded way of saying that there's going to be a constraint, an ongoing constraint on how we can use our, or how free we can be with our e-news subscriber list.
That list, but again, self-selectors can come off of that list. And that be, again, I would argue to you, part of a steering committee's construct of how does that kind of infrastructure work? And how do you deal with these legal components versus the ability to communicate and also not violate everybody's ability not to be pounded when that's not what they asked for.
And I do think we could do a self-select mechanism that would allow people to say, for these purposes, I have no problem with this group being, or this address being released for this purpose. I think there's ways we could get at that.
Okay, we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We're talking mechanisms, and I'd like to keep it more at the philosophical level of the form and function. But it kind of sounds like we've reached a bit of a tentative agreement what that role of the steering committee should formulate. And so I'd like to move on to number 6 of the identification of some of these hot topics, some of these work priorities. Shout them out. Communication strategy. Okay, yes. Okay, a legislative watchdog. Okay. What other issues or challenges are there that this group should face?
Kaibab National Monument that's proposed. Paramount.
Okay. Let's broaden that out a little bit. That's a one-topic thing. Maybe threats to jurisdiction, for lack of a better word.
That would fall underneath the legislative, and what Blaine's talking about is the commission's going to have a public meeting, I believe, on the 11th about that, with specific details on that. And Safari Club right now and MDF is working in Washington on that because that's a national issue and not something that we can affect. It doesn't go to legislature or anything.
Definitely, I agree with Alan. But let's not be broad in definition. When we speak of hot topics, oh boy, I'm passionate. Wow, I'm energized. Let's talk about the Kaibab National Monument that's proposed. Let's get a little excited about it, because if it comes to reality, there's going to be tears. So yes, it is a single item. It should be listed that way, because it is important.
Any other hot topics?
Predator control.
Predator control? Okay.
Baiting.
I'm sorry? Baiting? Okay.
How about a strategy to
Public access? Okay.
How about a strategy to protect our hunting and heritage?
A strategy to protect our hunting heritage. You want to elaborate?
Well, I think we're going to face a proposition from those who, as Terry was talking about, are
to guarantee what we do into the future. It's imperative.
Okay.
Create a strategy. I don't have all the answers, but that's a pretty hot topic.
Okay. And ensuring the future of hunting and angling.
Yes.
Okay.
North American model curriculum into the schools.
Okay. The North American model curriculum into the schools.
Way to involve other outdoor
Okay. I also heard a way to include other outdoor enthusiasts. Did I hear that right? Okay. How so? Expand a little bit.
marketing campaign put on by the educate Arizona about Arizona's about Arizona and what it offers. See ads for a huge audience of ads for on TV. In our state, I think we can show ads for Arizona for hours of school. So folks that are transiting here that don't realize it's
You a polo player. You a polo player.
Okay. So a repeat for those that couldn't hear you is a marketing campaign to reach a diverse wildlife audience. Outdoor audience. Okay.
For participation in a group or for preserving heritage?
for utilizing the resources we have.
Okay. Other hot topics? Yes. Okay. Uh-oh. No, the question is does the commission or the department have hot topics that we would like you to address? Uh-huh. Okay. I think that's a fair question.
I was just going to say, every issue that you brought up here, I mean, I know that there's always concerns. We all share concerns about becoming disconnected, about the insular aspects of what we've seen as a model none of us like. But everything you just brought up, it sounds just like an agenda for a department hot topics meeting. I mean, they're all on target. These are all the issues that drive a tremendous amount of energy in the department every day. I mean, it does, and it's not surprising at all to me, given the folks here and it's so many of you that I know and know your backgrounds, that we have that commonality of visibility on what the issues of the day are. There probably are some we can add.
That's what she's asking. What are some others that we've missed at the game department? So that was a good political answer, but let's see your specifics that we missed.
I'm smiling because if I could walk you all back into my office, I have a 10-foot long.
It's a good question. I would say that one of the things, it's growing wildlife, habitat, and all those issues that are involved in that. Access, obvious youth retention, absolutely is a great discussion point. And we've been having conversations about that. And I agree with my candidate for governor over here about the monument and the abuse of the Antiquities Act, personally. So I think it is a huge issue.
To federal interaction, federal intervention.
Yeah.
The travel management was mentioned somewhere earlier today, I think. Maybe that was another meeting, but we have a federal big brother that's
okay.
Under access and all that. I mean, yeah, those are all issues. So there's probably about 3 months worth of issues right there, I would guess.
Okay.
I think another hot topic here is member recruitment to this group. I'd like to just get more people involved, not only in the direction that we want to take, but involved in brainstorming again with ideas. Get it interactive a little bit. The commissioner mentioned that certain generations aren't really as savvy with today's technology, with the internet, with the iPhones and everything, whereas there's other groups out there that have information immediately and feed off of that. I think thinking outside of the box and maybe having a recruitment of youngsters, even just with ride with a game and fish, officer. How can we, like you say, a lot of people think that the game and fish department does its own thing and we're not involved. Well, let's open those doors up a little bit so people can look into your lives, into your world, into what you do for us and for the state's wildlife, through those mediums. And again, I'm just rambling now, but I'd like to maybe somehow get another recommendation as far as having people give us their input on that online through the department's website right now on things like that. Because we're here and we're just got off work, we're tired and everything like that. When we get home, we think of things and let's have that medium to be able to do that, and for others that aren't here to do that as well. Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Hector for handling the technology to get us on Facebook and Twitter and a website. We've got a great laundry list here of things that need to be addressed, and it could probably keep us pretty busy for some time to come, maybe even for the next year. But one of the things that immediately comes to my mind, and I always seem to be the guy that brings this up, is this doesn't come for free. So somehow we're going to have to figure out the funding. And that's got to be, if we come up with 4 or 5, if we group these hot topics into 4 or 5 groups that we're going to work on as committees to make things happen, then the very next thing that has to come up is how are we going to pay for this? And so I think funding has got to be right up there at the top.
Okay. Our opponents are watching this tonight, too.
There's an old Boy Scout term called knowing and using your resources. We don't know all of ourselves, but each one of us has a resource, has an ability, has a skill, either professionally or training or military. We need to find those out and get those people into the right committees.
Okay, thank you.
I might be a little bit off base here. I've kind of been following. I'm still a little naive, but my name's Jess. I am on the Phoenix chapter for SCI. A couple of my other board members are here too. I may not have known what I was coming to. I thought this was going to be more of like an in-between, like maybe a couple people who are unaffiliated were going to come and different chapters like Deer Association, Elk Society could come, and Game and Fish would maybe clue us in on some of the things you have going on, and then as a chapter we would get involved or not get involved. I think that would take care of your section 17, whatever it is, the legality part of it, because you're not getting involved as Game and Fish. It would be us taking the ideas and things that we discussed back to our own individual chapters and getting involved. I don't know how everybody else feels about that. I don't know if I explained it right, but I feel like that would probably be an easier way. We don't have to worry about funding because as our individual chapters, we're funding that process. I don't know. How many members are in your chapter? Board of directors or members? Yeah, 165.
Yeah, see, and they have 135,000 under each.
Well,
so the point is that yes, we could utilize all of the groups here, like SCI, to reach out to their members, but there's that other 100,000 that we need to get to that we also need to address.
But I think it's a valid point in the sense of, again, if the long-term objective is to build an infrastructure that increases the communication with those groups, and that may be something that comes out of the steering committee of, realize the department does updates, as you know, to many groups on a regular basis, but one of the things that may be discussed is kind of an informational town hall concept where there is the ability to feed organizations information in a more organized manner. So I think it's a valid point that would be under that communications auspice.
And that's what I thought it was. I didn't think it was, hey, we're going to form our own board. It's going to be just another Arizona wildlife. We're going to have to do our own fundraising and stuff like that. I didn't think that that's what we were coming to. I thought it was more of a let's bounce ideas off and see what we can get done.
And you may come to that conclusion. Maybe not. I mean, I think.
Okay. Do you mind going to the microphone? It's very difficult to hear you.
I'm Bonnie Cormany. If I understand it correctly, in the next 26 minutes, we need to come up with some kind of structured leadership to plan our next meeting because we're not going to have this facility. Okay? So we've come up with wonderful ideas. I think the next 25 minutes we should come up with a plan of what we're going to do next, get a group of people organized who are going to take the bull by the horn and come up with a structured meeting for the next time. I mean, we're running out of time. We need to plan the next meeting before this is over with and who's going to be in charge, who is going to be the steering committee of this, who can meet together and carry on, move on from this. Am I correct in that? No?
I personally agree that you are correct. I think, again, we have to respect the folks who are viewing on the web, and what we need to talk about is how do we create an opportunity for people in the next couple of days, not weeks, couple of days, to ascertain, or they can nominate themselves or nominate somebody else to be on the steering committee, and then / who also may rather be on a subcommittee, maybe not the time commitment of a steering committee, and give people an opportunity to make that self-selection. And then we can get back out to all of you, because I do know we have your emails. Here's who self-selected, and here's how we thought was a temporary steering committee that reflects people from around the state that have raised their hand, and here's people that have volunteered to be on steering committees, on subcommittees, which the steering committee can jostle with subcommittees under all these different topics you brought up, and we can insert people into those subcommittees. And then over time, you can decide whether that steering committee model works for you or not, whether it truly is temporary. And I view it as temporary until you decide what the structure looks like, working together. But that's, to me, the quickest way. We can come back to this facility for the larger group meeting. My intention is just to say that part of what we have to do is also take meetings on the road. I personally feel strongly we have an obligation to not always be in Phoenix. And so I've been bugging the guys at the department saying, okay, the third meeting is not Phoenix, but that's me. And it may be the steering committee goes elsewhere for the first one, and we have another meeting in June here where we can follow up on progress of the steering committee, et cetera. But I agree with you.
I might add one more thing to that, and it kind of comes along to your comments of you don't know what you've got as far as resources go. I think the self-nomination or the nominating of somebody else, you really know what your skill sets are. You know what you're good at. You also know what other folks are good at. And so as you nominate those, you'll nominate those who will do well in certain locations or certain responsibilities or things like that. So in answer to your question, I think the approach that we're going to try to use is if we did it here tonight, the folks online would not have that ability to be a part of that process. And so we'll set up a method where you can nominate. Doug, can we set up the SCG mailbox again?
Yes.
Are we all squared away there?
Yep.
Okay. We can use that mailbox as a nomination form if you would like to participate as the steering committee or as one of the subcommittees. Go ahead and send your name or the name of the person that you're nominating to that email address. We'll compile them and formulate it. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
And with contact, obviously your contact
Yes,
info
with
too. Because if you nominate somebody and they don't know you nominated them, right.
Excuse me, could I speak?
Yes, please.
Mike Nicolay, represent Desert Christian Archers. I think that I would suggest that we move forward with the self-nominating idea for the subcommittees. That is to say, the people in the room and the people on the web decide what of those 4 areas they're most interested in, and unofficially, we give each other our email addresses. We stand in that corner, that corner, that corner, that corner, whatever, and we meet each other tonight. And that we start the ball rolling is on a social level, on an idea level, not on an official level. Nobody is actually the steering committee, but these are the people who, and those are the people who are interested in particular ideas, and that we do that.
Go ahead.
To touch on that a little bit, I just texted with Amanda Moores of azgfd.gov, and we are willing to create a sub-forum on the main forum to facilitate with any communication that we want to have now, whether it's brainstorming, whether it's choosing of committees, subcommittees, or anything like that, so we can at least keep the conversation going between now and our next meeting or anything like that. So you would need to become a member if you're not already, and just interact with amongst each other to see what direction, and talk a little bit about what we've done today. So just wanted to put that out there. We do have that medium there. It is already there, so we can piggyback off of that. Just wanted to let everyone know.
Okay. That's a generous offer. We'll have to look into the logistics of that and see if that's something we are able to do as a department. But that very generous offer. Thank you. No.
We haven't had we're considered, as long as we do it right, a government speech venue, so we can limit the communication to our tools to those things that line up with the mission, department mission. And again, to Attorney General's on the staff, if we advertising opens us up to essentially having to say yes to any advertisement by any. And frankly, those groups I will not name that are not our friends don't particularly relish the idea of having to provide them space in our advertising. So, you do, and the hunt regulates that that's part of our agreement with that vendor for how they help defray the cost of that product. That's because of our contractual relationship with the vendor.
The vendor is, yeah.
And we know that we've addressed that to, in fact, to keep that wall from the way we advertise the neighborhood, the way we do it. We may have some opportunities to look at that with the new legislation that passed in space is their space, not ours for facility, the way they rate parking.
Okay.
There are still some limits to what they
Kurt, I'd like to give you a moment to kind of speak about next topics. I think we've pretty clearly established that the next meeting is not going to be held here. If you have your way, that's the way it's going to be. But I go ahead and take a few minutes to talk about potential next meetings, next locations, next steps.
Well, I guess I'd ask that question is, would you like to have a committee, the full committee here in June, and have a steering committee that goes, also begins, the outreach in June? Is that something or would you rather see the large committee meeting on the road? That'd be, a question for you to answer. And then the second thing I think that's important is that we make sure we repeat that email address so we get the coalition of the willing to help in the next levels of the endeavor. So I don't want to make sure in case you don't have it. But what are your thoughts about, do we send the steering committee on the road? Do we have the full committee here in June? Or do you want to have the full committee on the road in June? Are you willing to go on the road?
Are you talking about going to like different regional offices around the state?
Different regions of our state. So I'm thinking June. I could think of a nice place to go in June. That would be. Sorry, I could think of two nice places to go in June. So, don't want to make Jack mad.
No.
I think it goes back to communication, and it's a lack of communication because of the delay of the web. Something to keep in mind is that most public libraries have live web capabilities. So do school systems. They usually have their own broadcasting internally, as well as, police departments for better lack of reference. But so there's a lot of public avenues that we have that we can communicate live online with people, visually and in type from other areas at
Correct.
the same exact time. And I think that's one of the first things we need to accomplish at this point is get that in our hands, how we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't vote for the police department, I'm just saying.
This gentleman in the front had a quick question. Go ahead and ask your question.
Do the regional offices have video conferencing capability, where we can connect all 5 regions at the same time?
They're not going to feed you. They're not going to feed back to you live picture. If you were here, you're not going to see them. Right. Yeah, that's fair. If I got to decide logistically for June, because June will be here quickly, I would have a full committee here, and I would have the steering committee go out and touch people outside of the Phoenix metro area. If I got to decide, that's how I would recommend. We need to gather you all back here again in June, in my opinion, because we're going to be talking about then subcommittee work and all that kind of stuff. And we'll be busting, in my opinion, probably breaking into separate areas in here and wherever we need to put people together talking about those specifics. And then we would have, the steering committee could play the role of making sure that they're touching base with people outside of the Phoenix metro area, so that we show that respect. I think that's important, that respect is demonstrated, and that this is not just a Phoenix-centric enterprise.
Okay. So we have a proposal to meet here as a whole group, as the constituent group in June, and also have a steering committee in June, but hold it elsewhere in the state.
Subcommittee breakouts.
Is there anybody that's opposed to that? Okay, that's what we'll do then. Yes.
Coalition of the Willing, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's a good question that'll help me draw this meeting to a close here. Today we accomplished quite a bit here tonight. We discussed the vision and kind of clarified that vision for this group. We had some objectives that we clarified. We identified some potential functions of that steering committee, and identified a possible format for that, with the understanding that if that format doesn't work for folks, this group can readjust, but at least we have something to go on right now. And we also have a list of hot topics that committee and this group as well can begin to prioritize. And once those are prioritized, we can start hitting those and addressing those in order of priority. But the last comment that you had as far as how to go about getting that committee, anybody who is willing and anybody who is willing to nominate can send an email to this email address and let us know, or let us know in another capacity. And Game and Fish would be willing to use this mechanism to compile all those nominations. And then, Kurt, do you want to?
I think what we'll do is then we'll go through, I think the list won't be as, obviously because we're asking people to commit time. We'll go through that list, and if you would trust us to do that, to go through that list, to look again from geographical representation and all those kinds of things. And I believe it's a temporary steering committee because you may end up deciding to organize it differently over time. But to get us going, if we could take that coalition of the willing and figure out how we fit them into all the different boxes and have a broad base of people who are willing to serve on that, as well as the subcommittees, which in some ways may be a lot more important. And then you could choose to tinker with that later, but it gets us going.
Okay, and those would be chosen to represent geographic, getting out to the regions, things like that, and
affiliated, non-affiliated. You're right. Okay. Try to look at it from all those aspects.
Okay.
Would it be possible to get a copy of the notes as an email blast or something like that, as opposed to wait until the next meeting till we get something?
Fair request.
Just so we can at least, come prepared or whatnot. Yeah. Also, the 4 bullet points, I noticed that they weren't included in the agenda or anything like that. I think I'd like to have
that sent out
as well.
Fair request.
If possible. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's plan on putting it on the SCG website, which is azgfd.gov/SCG. We'll put it there, and we'll put it out to email if we have your email.
That's what I was going to recommend. You can put all this info like you just have written there out on an email. I've been getting your emails.
Okay.
We can do both.
Yeah, we can do that.
Just another thought on subcommittees. Identifying the resources that we currently have. I know that's been something that's come up in other meetings. Maybe a resource discovery group, that could potentially identify, the different, sets of resources we have in different areas, different regions, that kind of support the project.
Okay. At this time, it looks like we have one more comment.
One more comment. My name is Steve Craig. I am the president of the Southwest Fur Harvesters, affiliate of the Fur Takers of America. And I just want to make a comment to all of this here. We have many, many groups here. One of the greatest problems is unity. And if you're not, if we don't come together, a group, we're all dead. I don't know if you guys have ever had a gun poked at you. Us trappers, it happened to us in 1994 in this state. We lost it. And now we're crippled, but we ain't dead yet. But if you don't think that you don't have the gun pointing at you right now, you're only fooling yourselves. And if I really, really like what is about to happen here. But if you don't stop our bickering, our infighting, and come together as a unified group, we're all dead. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Well, hearing no other comments or desires to make more comments, let's get out of here. I want to take a quick moment to thank you for your time. I realize that many of you guys traveled quite a while, and it's getting late in the hour, but know that I personally and we as Game and Fish collectively appreciate the time and effort that you guys have put into this. So thank you.
Quick question. What time
Mr. Chisholm? Yes. Craig McMullen.
Oh, you talked on the phone.
We sure did. Yeah, thanks for coming out. Got some good info.